What was the significance of the eight banners? The eight banners, also known as jakun, gusa, baqi or pa-chi, were administrative and military divisions during China's later Jin and Qing dynasties, divisions into which all Manchu households were placed. In times of war, the eight banners functioned as armies, while during times of peace, the banner system was a basic organizational framework of all Manchu society. The eight banners were created in the early 17th century by Nurhaci, and they played an instrumental role in the unification of the Jurchen people, who would later be renamed the Manchu by Nurhaci's son, Hong Taiji, in the lead-up to the Qing dynasty's conquest in defeating the Ming dynasty. As Mongol and Han forces were incorporated into the growing Qing military establishment, the Mongol eight banners and Han eight banners were created alongside the original Manchu banners. The banner armies were considered the elite forces of the Qing military, while the remainder of the imperial soldiers were incorporated into the vast Green Standard Army. Membership into the banners became hereditary, and bannermen were granted land and income. After the defeat of the Ming dynasty, Qing emperors continued to rely on the eight banners in their subsequent military campaigns. After the 10 great campaigns of the mid-18th century, the quality of the banner armies declined. Their failure to suppress the Taiping Rebellion of the mid-19th century ruined their reputation. By the late 19th century, the task of defending the empire had largely fallen upon regional armies such as the Qiang army. Over time, the eight banners became synonymous with Manchu identity, even as the military strength vanished. History and establishment. Initially, Nurhaci's forces were organized into small hunting parties, each of about a dozen men, related by blood, marriage, clan, or their place of residence, as was the Jurchen custom at that time. In 1601, with the number of men under his command growing, Nurhaci reorganized his men into companies of 300 households, with 5 companies forming a battalion and 10 battalions becoming a banner. There were originally just 4 banners: yellow, white, red and blue, with each banner named after the colour of its flag. By 1614, the number of companies had risen to around 400, with the number of banners doubling, with bordered banners by 1615. Each of the original banners split with a plain banner and a bordered banner. The borders were coloured red, except the red banner that contained a white border. After a series of military victories, the banner armies expanded rapidly, first under Nurhaci, then under his successors. In the late 1620s, the Jurchens incorporated allied and conquered Mongol tribes into the eight banner system. In 1635, Nurhaci's son and successor, Hong Taiji, renamed his people from Jurchen to Manchu, and in that same year, the Mongols were separated into the Mongol eight banners. Overthrowing the Ming dynasty. Initially, Han soldiers were incorporated into the existing Manchu banners. However, when Hong Taiji captured Yongping in 1629, a contingent of Han artillery surrendered to his army. In 1631, these soldiers formed part of the old Han army under the leadership of Han commander Tong Yangxing. The artillery units were used decisively to defeat Ming general Zhu Dashou's forces at the siege of Dalinghe the same year. Hong Taiji proclaimed the creation of the Qing dynasty in 1636, and from 1637 until 1642, the old Han army mostly consisted of soldiers from Liaodong who had surrendered at Yongping, Fushan and Dalinghe, and were eventually organized into the Han eight banners, with the original eight banners being referred to as the Manchu eight banners. Although they were still known as the Eight Banners, there were, by that time, effectively 24 banner armies, 8 each for the three main ethnic groups of Manchu, Mongol and Han. By 1644, an estimated 2 million people were living in the Eight Banners system at the time that the Ming dynasty came to an end and the Shunzi Emperor was enthroned as the first Qing Emperor. Ming defectors played a major role in the Qing conquest of the Central Plain, with Han generals who defected to the Qing given brides from the imperial Aisan Gyoro family, while lower-ranking soldiers that defected were given non-royal Manchu women as wives. So many Han defected to the Qing, swelling the ranks of the Eight Banners, that ethnic Manchus became a minority within the banner system, making up only 16% of the number in 1648, with Han bannermen consisting of around 75%, with the remainder coming from Mongol bannermen. This multi-ethnic force conquered the Central Plain for the Qing, as Hong Taiji recognized that he needed those defected soldiers to defeat the Ming. The Qing created an entire Ju Han Jun, or Old Han Army, through defecting and captured soldiers. The Ming artillery had been successful in early battles until the Qing established an artillery corps made entirely of Han soldiers in 1641, with 8 Han banners being created by 1642, and they were responsible for the Qing conquering southern China. Territorial expansion. The soldiers wielding rattan shields under the command of Koxinga became famous for defeating the Dutch in Taiwan. Koxinga's grandson, Zheng Keshuang, surrendered before soldiers were incorporated into the Eight Banners. His rattan shield soldiers, known as Tung Paiying, were used to fight Russian Cossacks at Albazin. Other expansions of territory under the Kangxi and Qianlong emperors saw the Eight Banners take part in military campaigns to subdue Ming loyalists in neighbouring states, including the Burma Campaign. In the 10 great campaigns, the banner armies fought alongside the regular troops of the Green Standard Army and succeeded in expanding the Qing Empire to its greatest extent. While seen as successes, these campaigns were a heavy financial burden on the Qing treasury and exposed weaknesses in the Qing military, as numerous bannermen lost their lives fighting not only the enemy but also from tropical diseases, particularly in the Burma Campaign. While matching the Burmese and Vietnamese forces in open combat, the bannermen were often outflanked and ambushed by local combatants. Furthermore, the war elephants used by the Burmese and Vietnamese terrified the horses used by the bannermen cavalry. Later history. Although the banner armies were instrumental in the transition from Ming to Qing in the 17th century, they began to fall behind the firepower of the Western powers by the 18th century. By the 1730s, much of the fighting spirit had been lost, as the well-paid bannermen spent most of their time gambling, while subsidizing the 1.5 million men, women and children was an expensive undertaking, one that was riddled with embezzlement and corruption. Destitute in the northeastern garrisons led many Manchu bannermen to abandon their posts, as the Qing government responded by sentencing those caught with penal slavery or death. In the 19th century, neither the Eight Banners nor the Green Standard Army were able to quell the Taiping Rebellion or the Tian Rebellion, as armies were raised from local civilian populations, which led to the creation of the Xiang Army and the Hui Army, among others. It was these newly created armies that restored Qing control during that turbulent period. A Scottish missionary, John Ross, who was based in Manchuria in the 19th century, wrote of the bannermen, "Their claim to be military men is based on their descent rather than on their skill in arms, and their pay is given them because of their father's prowess and not at all from any hopes of their efficiency as soldiers. Their soldierly qualities are included in accomplishments of idleness, riding, and the use of the bow and arrow, at which they practice on a few rare occasions each year. During the Boxer Rebellion of 1899 to 1901, the European powers recruited 10,000 bannermen from the metropolitan banners into the Wu-wei Corps, gave them modernized training and weapons. However, many of the Manchu bannermen in Beijing were in support of the Boxers, sharing their anti-foreign sentiment. The pro-Boxer bannermen sustained heavy casualties and were driven into desperate poverty. Conclusion: from the time China was brought under the rule of the Qing dynasty, the banner soldiers became more professional and bureaucratized. Once the Manchus took over governing, they could no longer satisfy the material needs of soldiers by garnishing and distributing booty. Instead, a salary system was instituted, ranks standardized, and the 8 banners became a sort of hereditary military caste, though with a strong ethnic inflection. Banner soldiers took up permanent positions either as defenders of the capital, Beijing, where roughly half of them lived with their families, or in the provinces where some 18 garrisons were established. The largest banner garrisons throughout most of the Qing dynasty were at Beijing, followed by Xi'an and Hangzhou. Sizable banner populations were also placed in Manchuria and at strategic points along the Great Wall, the Yangtze River and Grand Canal. By the end of the 19th century, the Qing dynasty began training and creating new units based on Western training methods, equipment and organization. The banner system remained in existence until the fall of the Qing in 1912 and beyond, with the rump organization continuing to function until 1924. By the end of the Qing dynasty, all members of the 8 banners, regardless of their original ethnicity, were considered by the Republic of China to be Manchu. Han bannermen became an elite political class into the Republican era. That brings us to the end of this video, highlighting a historical era that has helped shape China today. If you've enjoyed watching and it's shown you a little detail of life and events here in China, then your subscribing to my channel would mean a lot to me. Thank you for watching. Make sure you click on the link to the next video, and until the next time, goodbye for now.